good morning, fifth grade. I keep doing that. I'm so sorry. Fifth grade. All right. So today we're going to continue with the Civil War. We are going to be looking at pages 147 to 149 this morning, and we are going to be looking at the people in the war. So when they say like this general fought that general, they really mean that this general led an army that fought this general's army, okay? It's not just two generals fighting each other. It's a whole army. But obviously you can't have one man in charge of the entire army, excuse me, because he can't be everywhere all at once. So we're going to learn about these men. We're going to learn about the Confederacy and the Union, names they're called, that they're known by. And we're going to learn about the first battle. All right? So, fun fact about this time in history is when the first photograph, picture, camera started. Okay? It was first invented, and it has a big impact in the war. So all the photographs that you are going to see are actual photographs from that time frame. These are actually the people, okay, of this time, and they're actually their pictures. All right, none of them are smiling because when the pictures first came out, the shutter like opens and it lets light come into the film. And so you had to hold the shutter open for 30 seconds, which is a really long time when you're trying to hold a smile and not move at all. So most of these people are not smiling because it's easier just to have your face normal for 30 seconds than to hold a smile for 30 seconds, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and go through our lesson for today. I have my handy dandy notes, as you can plainly see. I got out of the shower about an hour ago, so my hair is wet because here it's 5:20 and I'm really worried this isn't going to get on in time. So let's begin and see what happens. All right, so the South, okay, goes by many names. They are known as the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America, the Rebs, the Rebels, Johnny Reb, the Gray. Sometimes you'll see the blue and the gray. They are the Gray, okay? Their whole job and whole plan in life was to keep the Union out of the southern states. Because remember, the southern states seceded, some of them, right? And so they are trying to just keep the North at arm's length. Stay out, don't come in here. That's their goal in life, okay? The Union is known as the North, the Federals, the Yankees, the Yanks, okay, and blue, yes, and the United States of America. So when they talk about the United States of America, they are only talking about the Union at this time in history. They are not talking about the South, the southern states, all right? So remember, we had several states jump in with the secession with South Carolina right away. But then we had some states kind of hang back and say, hey, what's Lincoln going to do? So Lincoln said, hey, can you send me some troops to get these people back where they're supposed to be? Well, that made the other southern states that were holding slaves very upset. So Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina seceded as well during this time. All right? So then we have a group of states that are Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware that are considered border states. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot something. So the Union, their whole goal in life was to keep the country together, okay? So they're going to work to keep the country together. The South is going to work to keep the Union out. Does that make sense? All right. So let's go back to the border states. Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware. So these border states, they're called border states because they border the Union and the Confederacy, but that's not the only reason. These are slave states. These are slave states that decide to stay with the Union, okay? So Lincoln was able to keep them in the Union. Some say he threatened them. I don't know if that's true. Some say that they held closer to Union ideas than they did the South I don't know. What I do know was these were super important for Lincoln to keep in the Union, and that's what happened. And he made concessions throughout the war for these states to make sure they stayed in the Union until the end of the war. One of those concessions is the Emancipation Proclamation, which we'll talk about in a few days, and how that was a concession to those states. All right? Okay, so some advantages the North had. The North had a lot of advantages going into this war. They had 22 million people, okay? Now, those aren't 22 million men, but these are 22 million people. That was the population of the North at the time that the Civil War began. Remember, the Civil War began in 1861 in April when Fort Sumter was attacked, yes? The North had many more railroads. Most of the railroads in the country at this time, although not all, were in the North. They went across the North. The goal was to unite both parts of the country so that goods and services could be passed across, fruits and vegetables and cattle and things. So there was a lot of that in the North because the North had the factories. Factories. Another very important advantage for the North. They are able to, through the whole entire Civil War, they are able to process the materials needed. He really wants me. The materials needed in order to fight a war. Remember, war is not just walking around and shooting people. You have to have ammunition. You have to have guns. You have to have clothes. You have to have shoes, which I don't know what's with this bug. I'm really sorry, guys. Another big advantage, the North had a navy, sorry. The Union had a navy, whereas the South didn't really have any sort of navy at this time. The Union could also ship troops and supplies easily by mule or horse. Oh, he is really pestering. So they were able to move their supplies way more quickly, not just by the railroads, but they had an ample supply of mules and horses. Remember, this time in history, no cars, no trucks, no planes, none of that exists. Bugs probably, yes, but everything else, no. All right, the South had advantages too. This guy's gonna drive me crazy. They had less to travel because basically most of the battles of the Civil War took place in the South. And originally they weren't really planning on invading the North. Their job was to keep Union out, right? That was their job, that was their goal, to keep the Union out. They didn't want to go in and invade and overtake the Union. They just wanted to keep the Union out. So they had less travel area because they weren't planning on going into Maine or Massachusetts to take them over. They were just trying to stay in their little part of the country and protect it from the Union invaders. And yes, that's how they looked at it. Okay? So they were also fighting to protect their homeland. Now, when you're fighting to protect your homeland, you have a greater investment, and you tend to fight harder than you would if you were going somewhere else and just helping somebody out, okay? So they were protecting their homeland. They had more trained military people, okay? Not only their generals, but their enlisted people were also more trained. They had been in many battles. Now, that's not to say that there weren't Union generals that were, as you will see, Winfield Scott was, and Grant was, and they kind of all learned together, okay? All right. Their biggest disadvantage was the fact that they only had 9 million people. Think about that. 22 million people or 9 million people. So their force wasn't as much as as the North was. They could not pull as many people. They didn't have as many people. All right? Even if they took everybody, which they can't because you got women and children in that 9 million, but even if they took every single person, okay? And they only took half. The North still has more people, okay? So that was a huge disadvantage, and it becomes greater and greater through the war. All right, they had very few factories in the South. The South basically grew the stuff and sent it north or sent it to England, but they didn't really do anything with it. So to create the ammunition that you need, to create the clothing that you need, the shoes that you need, the weaponry that you need, is going to be very difficult for the South because they don't have anything set up already. So they basically have to start from scratch, where the North already has everything set up. They can just change what they do. All right? Now, one of the advantages that they were both hoping for in 1861 was that both the North and the South hoped that France or England, Britain, would come into the war on their side. That would give them a great advantage. Remember, when the War of Independence happened, the French came in and helped the United States to defeat Britain. Okay? So let's look at some of the main generals, and then I'm going to kind of peek behind and grab them so you can see them. We're going to look first at Winfield Scott. All right. Making sure I got everything on my notes. Winfield Scott. Here he is, Winfield Scott. Okay? So, Winfield Scott. I'm trying to decide where I want to put him. I'll put him up here. Okay, there he is. Winfield Scott. So Winfield Scott, let me tell you about the man. Okay, he was a veteran. My back's bothering me, so I'm going to sit sometimes. All right, guys. Hey, I'm going to move you. Hi. Okay. So Winfield Scott, okay, he was a veteran of the War of 1812. Remember when the British tried to take back over the United States again? And the Mexican-American War, remember, poked the Mexicans into a battle with us because he wanted their land and they wouldn't give it to him, so he poked them into a war. All right, so he actually starts out in charge of the Union Army at the beginning of the war, and he comes up with an anaconda plan. Now, an anaconda is a snake, that squeezes its prey, and his plan was to squeeze the life out of the South. He was going to envelop and crush the South by blockading all of their coastline. Okay, if you look at a map, a lot of the, I'm trying to think if it's all of them, a lot of them anyway, of the Confederate States, Texas is on the Gulf, are on the Atlantic Ocean. Mississippi is on the Gulf. So some of them are also on the Gulf of Mexico, okay? So his plan is to take ships and do the entire coastline, the Atlantic Ocean over into the Gulf of Mexico, that no shipping can come in, so no supplies can come into the South. And remember, they don't have very many factories. They can't make their own supplies, all right? And he was going to block the Mississippi River also, to divide the South into two, so that his basic plan was to cut off all supplies to bring the war to an end. Now, some people didn't like that because they thought the war would be over lickety-split, 1-2 battles. In fact, it started in April, and a lot of people say, it's going to be over by December. Kind of like the coronavirus, yeah? Oh, yeah, 2 weeks, we'll all be good, and here we are 3 months later. So that was kind of the same idea. They thought, this is going to be a quick, fast war. We'll be in, we'll be out. Your plan will never have a chance to take effect because you have to cut off supplies for a while. Because imagine if right now, today, you could not go out of your house, okay? You guys can last for a while on the food that's inside your house right now, okay? But eventually, you have to resupply your food. So that's the same idea as the Anaconda plan. Eventually, the South will run out of supplies, but it takes time, all right? Winfield Scott, though, with his vast experience in war, never believed this was going to be a fast war. He always believed this was going to be a long, drawn-out war. And guess what? He's right. It's 4 years that this war continues. All right? So he was going to cut off all the shipping and attack down the Mississippi, which I told you about, and cut the place in half. And then he hoped that that would cause the Confederacy to surrender because they would be without food and supplies for clothing and things. All right? Okay, so our next guy we're going to look at is Ulysses S. Grant. Okay, there's a picture of him. Yes, it's a real photograph. Yes, it's really him. Okay, Ulysses S. Grant. Okay, he gets a nickname during the Civil War called Unconditional Surrender Grant. He also gets the nickname United States Grant, U.S. Grant, because his initials are U.S. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Ulysses S. Grant. Okay, so Ulysses S. Grant did not look like a great warrior. He was short. He was slim, he was disheveled, which means like his hair was always out of place and his clothes didn't quite fit right, and he always looked like a kind of a mess. Okay, he went to West Point just as well as all the generals you're going to see here. All right, and he was mediocre. He wasn't like a top performer. General Lee, which you'll see in a little while, he was a great cadet at West Point. He did fabulous. Ulysses S. Grant, not so much. He was kind of like, you know, we would call him like a CD student. Okay, he got through. Yes. And so in 1850, Grant actually resigns from the army under threat of a court-martial. So a court-martial is when you did something sassy, and they're going to take you and they're going to try you. So what he decided to do was just get out. He's like, I'm done. Okay, you might say, well, how did he become a general? Well, when the war broke out, he said, hey, you know, I'm here to help. So what he had done after he resigned is he didn't do so well with the things he tried. So first he tried to be a farmer, and that didn't work out. They tried to be a real estate agent. You know, those are people who sell houses, properties. Yes, they've had them like forever. 1800s, yeah? And he didn't do very well at that. So in 1861, when the war breaks out, he's actually working for his father in a leather shop in Galena, Illinois. Okay? And he says, hey, you know, I'll join back up. I went to West Point. You know, I've been in the military before. I've been at the Mexican-American War. I'm good. And so they say, sure, come on in, because they're looking for people. And they bring him in as a brigadier general, okay? And he is in command of Cairo, Illinois, the army that's in Cairo, Illinois. And he surprises everybody with his ability to win wars, with his ability to understand when to fight and when to surround, take siege of a place. So he really impresses Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln makes him the general eventually. It takes him a little while. Makes him the general over the entire Union Army. That's eventually what happens. Okay? So those two guys are the Union. They are fighting on the Union side. They are for the North. Okay? Let's look at a couple people from the South, shall we? First, we're going to look at the President of the South. And here he is. Jefferson Davis. Okay? He becomes the President of the South. And Jefferson Davis is not he kind of is your average president. Because remember, I've told you that if you want to become president, becoming a war hero helps. Not that you have to, but it does. So guess who he was? A war hero. So he's the president for the Confederacy, okay? And let's talk a little bit about him. So he had a lot of military experience. He also went to West Point. Something to think about as we go through the Civil War. Everybody knew each other, okay? Some of these guys were best friends before the Civil War, and then they fight on opposite sides. They all knew each other. They all went to West Point together. they all were kind of in the same group, okay? So these are not strangers fighting each other. This is not like if all of a sudden you flew to Canada to fight somebody. This is friends fighting each other. These are guys that went to school together fighting each other, okay? So he fought in the Mexican-American War, just like him, and they all fought on the same side at that time, so, you know, they probably knew each other from there too. He also served in the government. So Jefferson Davis was not new to government service. He had been the Secretary of War under Franklin Pierce. When Franklin Pierce was president, he was in the cabinet of Franklin Pierce's presidency, and he was the Secretary of War. Okay, he really did not want to secede. He really did not want to be the president of the Confederacy, but he was kind of like talked into it. Yeah. And once he became, he did it with his whole heart and his whole effort. He did it as under the Lord. All right. Next, we have his. All right. Yeah. I had to make sure I had the right guy. So we had his big general, Robert E. Lee. He's going to be the most famous general of the war. Robert E. Lee is an interesting character. Robert E. Lee was actually asked by Abraham Lincoln to be the leader of the Union Army. But Lee said, hang on, let me see what my state does. And so the whole reason, and only reason he fought for the Confederacy was because he was loyal to his state. Robert E. Lee actually did not believe in slavery. He thought that that was wrong. But he decided that he was going to be loyal to his state, and he fought for the Confederacy. All right. He also went to West Point. He was a super big war hero in the Mexican-American War because he figured out how to get up on this hill outside of Mexico City that was all filled with thorns and stuff, so that he had the advantage over Santa Anna's army. And so he really showed that he was a smart at strategy on how to get places and get things done, okay? So he will be the general that leads his army furthest north ever into the Union territory, okay? He goes up against people, he has half the army, half the number of men, and he defeats them, all right? Super smart guy. All right, so here are some other generals that we are going to learn about. I just have to find them back here, okay? So we have John Bell Hood. Okay, that's John Bell Hood. I know these pictures are a little smaller because I'm actually running out of printer paper. So I was worried that if, let's put them down here with Confederacy, that if I printed everybody off, I would run out of paper. So that is John Bell Hood. He is in Confederacy. Joseph Johnston. No, not Johnson. Johnston. Okay. There's Joseph Johnston. He's going to be in the first battle. The Battle of Bull Run or Manassas, which we'll talk about why there's two names to these battles. Okay. And then we have Jeb Stuart. Okay. Jeb Stuart always looks disheveled to me. There's Jeb Stuart. Okay. And he is also with the Confederacy. All right. So we're going to learn more about these generals as we go along. The other generals on the Union are McClellan, George McClellan. My husband had printed this one off like early, so he's like huge. So we'll put him way up here. Okay. And we have, here he is. William Tecumseh Sherman. Okay, William T. Sherman. All right. He is very good friends with Ulysses S. Grant. Together they go, we're done playing, we're going to end the war. All right. Okay, we also have, well, we'll get to those when we get to the war, I guess. We'll just wait on them, okay? When we get over here, they're over here. All right. All right, so let's look at another great hero who makes his nickname and his splash at the Battle of Bull Run, Battle of Manassas, which is Andrew Jackson. He gets a nickname called Stonewall because he held his men like a stone wall, and so from that point forward, he was known as Stonewall Jackson. Okay, he is a Confederate soldier. Okay, they go to West Point. Let's talk a little bit about Stonewall Jackson. He was, however, a Christian, a very devout Christian. Okay, so Thomas Stonewall Jackson was the greatest hero, a devout Christian. He converted to Christ after the Mexican-American War. Oh, are you hearing this? Mexican-American War, Mexican-American War, Mexican-American War, Mexican-American War. Are you seeing a pattern? Mexican-American War. Okay, that's where a lot of these guys got their training, the Mexican-American War. He taught Sunday school for black children, for African-American children. Back in this time, they're not called African-American, they're called black. So this is the same thing if I use it interchangeably because I'm trying to be historically accurate, okay? And which was a big deal because people did not teach, okay, African Americans at this time. He was a brilliant general. He could figure out maneuvers and stuff. Again, he made a name for himself by standing firm. His faith carried him through dangerous battles. All right, so I want to read this quote. Somebody asked him, "Why are you not scared? You never seem to be scared." And he said this. He said, "Captain, my religious belief teaches me to feel as safe in battle, as in bed. God has fixed the time for my death. I do not concern myself about that, but to be always ready, no matter when it happens." If I remember correctly, his quote. Oh, no. Overtakes me. Okay. So, Jackson gave God the credit for every battle he won. He ordered that there be religious services on Sunday for all of his men. He was worried about their spiritual health. So he ordered that all men, had the opportunity to go to services. He didn't make them go to church, but what he did is he always went to services. He also carried tracts in his bag that he would hand out to his soldiers. And he was very, very concerned about their spiritual being. Okay? All right, so knowing all that about our generals, we're going to switch gears. And I ran out of paper, so we're going to come over here. I think I need to get you a little closer. Hang on. We're moving. All right, this is just my chair I've been sitting in. Ignore it. Okay, so this is the first battle. Battles in the Civil War have two names. The reason they have two names is one of the names is based on a landmark, okay? And one of the names is based on the city. So we are going to look at the first battle, the Battle of Bull Run. So the Union felt if they could take Richmond, Virginia, that they would win the war and it would be over quickly. So this is what they tried to do. So in July of 1861, okay, General Irving McDowell, let me grab Irving. Sorry, I'm distracted by grabbing Irving. Here he is, Irving McDowell. Okay. So General Irving McDowell, he is the Union, in case you're wondering. He marches his soldiers towards Richmond, Virginia, in hopes of taking over Richmond and putting an end to this war very quickly. Okay? So, Union guy. All right. On July 21st, the battle begins. This battle ends on July 22nd, in case you're wondering. And he fought against General PGT. I do not know what the PGT stands for. Beauregard. There he is. Okay? He is a Confederate soldier. Okay, Confederacy, we'll put him over here. Okay, he also fights against Johnston. Okay, and Stonewall Jackson. And remember, this is where he gets his name, Stonewall. All right, so the Union and the Confederacy, this is the first time they go to battle. McDowell thinks he can just fight these guys off and take Richmond. It's their capital. The Confederacy will fall. The war will be over. Life will go back to normal. That is not what happened, though. The battle occurred by a creek called Bull Run. Okay? So what would happen is the Confederacy would name theirs based on landmarks, and the Union would do theirs based on the city. Okay? So it was by a creek called Bull Run and a town called Manassas. Okay? And neither group was really ready for war. Because remember, they just kind of thought this was a walk in the park. Even though many of them have been to war before, they just were not ready as a group. The soldiers weren't ready. There's actually people picnicking at this one because they all thought, oh, hey, let's go out to this fun little activity. And they had picnic blankets and it was crazy. So as the bombs start going, they weren't really bombs, but cannonballs, and the firing starts, people start gathering up their stuff and leaving in a hurry because they realize this is not like an entertainment concert kind of thing. This is really actually a war. So the Union attacks the Confederacy and pushes them. So the Union attacks, then the Confederacy pushes them, then the Union pushes them back, and then the Confederacy pushes them again. Eventually, they all, leave, okay? So what happens is the Union retreats, and the Confederacy is considered the winner of the first battle of the Civil War. Remember, wars are a bunch of battles put together to make a war. Kind of like, think about it like a book. A book has a bunch of chapters in it, and you put it together and it's a whole book. So that's kind of what this is. We're going to be looking at the battles of the Civil War. All these battles coming together make up the war. All right. Lessons learned from this war. Oh, I'm sorry. The people are running and everything, and Thomas Jackson holds his men there, tells them not to move, tells them not to leave. Another general looks over at him and says, hey, you guys need to act like his guys. He is holding like a stone wall. So stone walls aren't easily moved. I don't know if you guys have ever had experience with a stone wall, but they're not easily moved. So Stonewall Jackson got his name as a stone wall because he held his men. So that was their big thing. So lessons learned from the battle. This was not going to be an easy war. Okay? That was a big lesson learned. It's not going to be an easy war. Remember, they thought, oh, we'll be done by Christmas. So not true. The other thing was it was going to be a high casualty war. So in this battle, the casualties for the North was 3,000. Okay, this means 3,000 people either were wounded. Oh, let me turn you again. Sorry. 3,000 people were either wounded or died. And in this case, 480 men died. And the rest were wounded. 2,780, okay, were wounded or missing. Now, please realize missing didn't necessarily mean hurt because there was a lot of desertion, which means you just leave and you don't go back. In the Civil War, there was tons of desertion. All right, so they are finding out that this war is going to be very, very costly. So on the south side, okay, they had 1,390 casualties. All right, 390 men died. And 1,000 men were injured or missing. Okay? Even though the North lost more men, right? They have more men to choose from. Remember, they got 22 million people versus 9 million people. So you might say, oh yeah, look, the South, they won. But remember, these numbers are a smaller percentage for the North than they are for the South. All right? And that concludes today's lesson. I know it's kind of long, and they probably all will be kind of long. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure I cover everything. All right? So I have 10 minutes to get this up for you, so I got to go. All right, see you. Bye.